All right, we're recording, and I am with Nancy Stark. Nancy, talk to me a little bit about where you are in your writing journey.
Um, for several years, I was a writer doing many different things that have nothing to do with novels. Uh,
Nice.
I basically owned a production company and did a lot of scripting for informational and educational projects.
Hey, that's exciting.
Oh, it was fun. It was
Yeah,
fun, and I'm glad to be doing this
yeah. I
at
do a
this
little bit of
stage.
that for my day job, so I know
Oh,
that world a
yeah,
little
I
bit.
can
Yeah.
believe that. You're good
Mhm.
at it as far as the interview part of it.
Oh, thanks.
And when we used to do videos, I did a fair amount of interviewing, and I know what it can be like when you have to get the ball rolling and keep people focused. So I'll
Yeah.
try to do this time
No,
around.
you don't have to. We
Uh,
don't. This isn't an interview. We're just doing a session together.
yeah,
So
okay,
you
good.
don't have to stay focused at all.
Uh,
We can talk about whatever you want.
Well, the short answer beyond that is I've never done a novel before. It's something I've always wanted to do. So when I retired, like a lot of people who retire, I thought, well, what do I love and what do I want to do? Because I have time that's my own time.
Mhm.
And I decided to write a novel. It's a very different format, I'm finding out, from
Yeah,
anything else I've done, like
yeah.
compared to a press release or doing like a video program,
Mhm.
or even I've done e-learning, interactive e-learning with narratives and stuff.
Yeah,
It's not at all, well, I won't say it's not at all, but in many ways I'm learning more than anything.
yeah. It's its own
I'm a
weird
learner.
thing. Yeah, and it's a strange little art form all unto itself.
It is,
Yeah,
absolutely. I'd agree with that.
yeah. It
Uh,
reminds me of like the different types of writing you're talking about remind me of like ink painting versus sculpture versus like sculpting. Like they're yes, you are making art, but they're very different things.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's true. And some of what you do, like when you're doing it for a living, is more of a craft really than an art in
yeah.
some ways. And this is the first time I've really done, well, I won't say it's the first time. I've written musicals, I've written plays
Nice.
that were my own, creative endeavor. Again, very different medium.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but this is like a labor of love for me.
Okay.
That's what it is. And I'd be the first to say I have a lot to learn.
That's exciting. So, how far along this is you said this was your first novel you're working on?
Yes.
How far along are you with it?
I'm approximately halfway through.
Okay,
In fact, the scenes that we're going to discuss today take place just at the end of part two,
great.
which is sort of a turning point.
Okay,
Um, and there's actually one more scene that'll, make the turn, so to speak,
gotcha.
that happens after these scenes. Um, And it's taken me quite a while to get to that point, and I have all kinds of uh, dishes in the air spinning,
Yeah, yeah.
trying to keep them all still
Trying to keep them all
spinning.
going. Now, is this book your lead character is Kate? Is this in the section we're going to read? Is this a single POV story, or do you head hop? Or are you going to other points
um,
of view?
I, for the most part, I would say the majority of the novel is in Kate's point of view, third
Okay,
person, but her point of view.
great.
However, at points throughout the novel, sporadically throughout the novel, I have other characters come in
Okay,
and they'll have like a chapter that's their own chapter. And why I've decided to do that is because they show perspectives that Kate doesn't have.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, talk to me a little bit about the change Kate is. So before I'm going to work through the piece with you, but it's going to help me give you better notes if I know kind of where you are in the story. So talk to me about the change Kate is going through. Who is she
Okay.
before the switch and who's she going to be after the switch?
Well, when the book starts, Kate has just retired from being a circuit court judge.
Okay.
And her husband has died the year before, and she's never really grieved his loss because it's sort of a clouded situation how he died.
Okay.
She's estranged from the court case she was on was a messy court case and very visible. and that's part of why she's retired. So even on a career level, she hasn't been doing so well.
Okay.
And she's very much estranged from most of the people in her family and many of her friends.
Okay.
And her journey, as far as how she goes through from there to here, is starting. She's been hiding at home, abusing alcohol, kind of hoping it'll all go away
Gotcha.
at the beginning of the book. But she slowly opens up and starts. She wants very much at the point that we're at to have a relationship with her daughter, but her daughter has pretty much written her off because of what happened when her father died.
Okay.
And there are things she doesn't know about when he died that maybe if she knew them would make her feel differently towards her mother, but maybe not.
Okay.
She at the end of part one, we're at part two at this point. She agreed to foster a dog, Fairbanks, and it was a reluctant agreement. She kind of got forced into it because she was on a board and not going to board meetings, and she was told, "This is your redemption."
Yeah.
So she has been learning to live with a dog. She's not necessarily a real a dog person.
Okay.
Although she becomes one over the course of the novel.
Gotcha.
And what's going to happen at the end of the scene that tacks on to this scene that's part of the chapter is she'll end up deciding to adopt the dog.
Okay. Great.
So that's where we are.
So that's kind of her first functional relationship.
That it really is, as far as that goes, and it brings her into contact with other people that help help as far as opening her up.
Okay. So, just a couple notes about the piece. It's very well written.
Thank you.
I didn't have a ton of like notes for you where I wanted to be like, hey, pull this out or put that back. It flows well. The conversations are strong. I think that it moves at a good pace. Like you've got a lot of really strong things happening. So great work on it.
Thank you.
You should be proud of.
That makes me feel really, really good.
Yeah, you should be proud of what you've written. It's a good piece, and I can tell that you're coming to it with some really strong narrative understanding of like how to craft a scene. So
Good.
that's great. What I do want to talk to you about is I want to talk to you about the voices, which is something you had asked me about when you sent it to me, because I want to make sure that the voices are hitting what you want. So let me share. Dun, 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 share the screen. How are you helping the reader? Kate is a hard character.
Yes.
How are you helping the reader connect to Kate?
I right now I think it's hard to see how they're connecting because she's in such a bad place in this particular scene. But one of the ways that I think is by seeing how she interacts with her friends.
Okay.
And also with the dog, because her relationship up to this point has grown quite a bit with the dog.
Okay.
But not with her family. Unfortunately, with her family at this stage, it's still really not a good place.
Really not a good place. Okay. What is your do you have any comps for Kate? Like, can you think of any characters where you're like, when I picture Kate, I really think of this character from this story?
You mean when you say comps, you mean other characters
Comparables. Yeah, like sorry, comps is a
okay,
weird.
I'm thinking.
You don't have to. If nothing comes off the top of your head,
Nothing comes off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that.
So when I read Kate, I think very much of Casey Affleck's character in the movie Manchester by the Sea. And the reason I think of that is because he is kind of lost in his career, lost in his life, lost in alcohol because of now that movie, he's grieving, but the mystery of why he's grieving is a big part of, and why everybody hates him is a big part of the unveiling.
Exactly.
Yeah. But and you're not doing that with Kate, but what helps in that, what helps us relate to characters like those two characters, to his character and Kate's character, is in this first part, before you start to show her opening up, I'd recommend that you really lean heavy into her grief. And you might have already, but show us pictures. Like she needs to, if you have a scene of her drinking at some point, it needs to revolve around things around her that remind her of her husband. Does that make sense?
I do have scenes like that. Like for
Okay, great.
instance, uh, 2 months before this, she goes through his death anniversary.
Okay,
And there's an entire chapter that's devoted to her remembering back. The same thing is true for her daughter, who is in
okay.
this scene.
Yeah,
She thinks quite frequently about childhood memories, things that were happier, things that where they were actually functional and happy together,
okay,
uh, and then sort of it traces how their relationship frays over
okay.
time.
Do you have are you doing flashbacks of her and
Uh,
her husband
Very
together at
short
all?
ones. Very,
Okay.
very, very short.
Make sure in those flashbacks her voice modulates in a really big way. Do you know what I
Okay.
mean by that?
Meaning it's from her point of view and it's her remembering, and we get a sense of her internal thoughts.
Meaning that she sounds different to the reader. So,
Okay.
have you ever, I'm
Interesting.
not gonna waste time if you've heard me talk about this, but have you ever heard me talk about the different components of a character voice?
No.
Okay, let's do that
No.
because I think that's gonna help when we get to Beth and Owen and the daughter as well. Let
Okay.
me pull up a whiteboard real quick and we can talk through it that way. So when you think about a character's voice, um, everything we've talked about Kate so far has been about how her backstory, her present story, and like the events in the plot and her character growth. So we've said that there's kind of three versions of Kate. There's Kate, Kate before the story. Then there's lost and grieving Kate.
Hmm.
And then there is Kate who starts to reconnect.
Right. That's exactly true.
Yeah. So great. You've laid out a great kind of classic character change here, which is fantastic, right? Like
But
yeah, it's
are
great.
you
This story
happy?
because readers want, we all want, regardless of the story medium, we want stories that we know and that feel familiar, but that also surprise us. So you've got a good like character arc here and feeling familiar, and we can lean into that to make you to help the reader understand. We could like I just immediately drew to Casey Affleck's performance. There's a whole bunch of other ones I could draw to. You can lean on those old comparable thoughts of this kind of character and use the reader's expectations to then subvert them. Let's talk about how to do that in a second. So when we talk about a character voice, like who Kate is before the story, that she's a judge, that she was married, that her husband died, that's all part of her backstory because the
Right.
story starts right here.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Her backstory is not her character voice, although we often conflate the two. From her backstory emerges her personality. So you've given me some adjectives for this Kate. She's clearly, because she's an ex-judge, she's clearly going to be, well educated and intelligent. Um, she's going to be, she's grieving, which is a big part. Grieving in an unhealthy way. How else would you describe Kate's personality? Give me a couple
I
adjectives.
would describe her as a person who looks at things pretty much black and white a lot of the time.
Okay, that's
Because as
great.
a judge, that's what she's had to do is weigh the evidence and make a decision in a lot of cases.
Does
I
she
think,
often believe she's right?
oh, very much.
Okay,
She can be very judgmental.
gotcha.
I don't think she's a person who changes easily. Not that anyone does.
Great.
But because she thinks she's right a lot of the time, she has blind spots.
Okay.
Like for instance, with her daughter that we'll be seeing in this, um, she really doesn't understand why her daughter is so upset.
Okay.
why she would do what she does in this particular scene.
Okay.
Um, and there's a part of her that is very private in the sense that she doesn't want people to know about her grief. She wants people to think that she handles everything very successfully and confidently, and that she's a woman who gets things done.
Okay.
Um, so that part of her that's the vulnerable part, the part that uh, is tied to the grief and tied to, in many ways, her estrangement with her family. Um, she has a hard time knowing how to improve it.
Gotcha.
And
So
she is stubborn, yes.
yeah, so I'm just throwing out some like summary words as you were
Right.
putting those together. So if we take these six, this is a good personality sketch. So we go from her background to her personality, and then we go to character voice.
Hmm.
And character voice has five components to it. There's the words she's going to use. So
Okay.
the actual like types of words that she says. There's the uh sorry. There's
Not a
the
problem.
how am I forgetting this? Words. Oh, there's the language um she uses. So like the words are like various like intelligent. We usually put these two together, which is why I'm struggling a little bit, because I was just talking to the coaches and we had these together. I just did a master class this weekend and we put these two together. So I'm like, wait, how do they separate again? So words are like the actual words she chooses to use. Are they in high educated words or low educated words? Do they she's going to use some legalese probably throughout the book because she is a judge, so she's
Yeah.
going to sound and talk like a judge. Language has to do with like phrasing, like
Hmm.
the way that she says things. She might have some phrases she uses over and over again. For somebody that's like black and white thinker who's judgmental, you might use a phrase that's like, well, that's not right. Right. Like that might be a phrase that she says
Oh,
continuously. Does
interesting.
that make sense?
Okay.
Like, and what I'm doing is I'm taking her personality and then I'm asking, how does it fall into these components? So we've got words, language, and then body language, how she holds herself comes
Hmm.
out of her personality. So somebody who's shy is going to look down a lot, put their hands in their pockets, not pay attention, not make eye contact with people. She's not that way. She's confident. So we can imagine that when she's talking to other people, she's probably going to straighten up a little bit. She's going to
Hmm.
hold herself high. She's doesn't have a problem being resistant. So she's going to you have at one point her marching
Hmm.
perfect, like strong, confident movement is what we're looking for from her. Um, the next one is cadence, which cadence means the construction of her sentences. So when we talk about cadence, short sentences or long sentences, right? Like complicated sentences with commas and semicolons when she talks, or are we talking about like smoother kind of shorter quick sentences marked by periods or lots of questions? And we can talk about her in a second and how her voice. The last one is pacing, which in Dialogue Dr. World, why is that happening? Stop that. That's why that's happening. In Dialogue Dr. World, pacing means when she's in a conversation, how often does she vocalize? How often does she talk in comparison to others? So, again, going back to that shy character, a shy character is going to hide in a group conversation. She's not going to talk very much. She might have a lot of inner thoughts, but she's not going to talk. A confident character is going to voice her opinions all the time. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh. And I do think that's more who she is, although in situations where she doesn't like the tone of the situation, where it's getting too personal, then she might tend to clam up more.
Yeah, and that's great. So let's talk about each one of these just to make sure we're on the same
Okay.
page. Her words, like I said, I see her as educated. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
Yes.
What else would you say about the words she uses when she talks?
I think because she's been a judge, she's used to trying to talk in terms that other people understand, meaning she doesn't. While she's educated, she doesn't necessarily use high-flown language. A lot of times she'll try and put things into more of a black and white construct that people automatically understand.
Okay, great.
Uh,
I think that's
Um,
great.
yeah.
Language, any phrases she uses repeatedly or anything she says?
That's a really good question because I haven't thought about it from that point of view, but I would think in her mind at least she's always saying, I'm always right.
Yeah,
Uh,
so some phrases you might want to think about giving her that. And part of the reason I want to talk to you about this now, Nancy, is when we talk about Beth and we talk about Owen, we talk about our daughter, you can do this same exercise for them. And if these
mhm.
five
Oh,
components are
cool.
different,
Yeah.
you're going to have radically different sounding voices. Does that make sense? So, like,
Yes,
if we
fully.
can make their voices sound different in our minds, then when you go to write, you'll have kind of a guide to be like, okay, how do I write Owen? How does Owen sound different? Does that make sense? And
Yes.
so he's probably not going to explain things like she explains things. He's probably not going to use language like she uses. I would probably give her a phrase like this is just off the top of my head, but like, what I mean by that common phrase of people that explain themselves all the time. What I mean by that is, right? Like, and people
Right.
who are frustrated with her are going to find it belittling. They're going to be
Right.
like, you
She's
don't need to
talking
tell
down.
me. Yeah, you're talking down to
Right.
me. I know what that word means. You don't have to explain that to me, right? Like, but what I mean by that conveys like you're not, I have to explain myself because I'm on a higher level than you, kind of a common judge
Right.
thing. Yeah. Um, again, we said body language is going to be confident. Um, spend three quarters of my day formatting little boxes like this. Confident, such a confident and aggressive body language.
Yes.
Her cadence. So when she is in this state, when she's grieving in an unhealthy way and she's closed off from people, I would recommend that you make her cadence shorter sentences
Mm-hmm.
and uh kind of periods, like you're ending sentences with periods.
Okay. So definite. More
Definite period and
declarative.
very
Okay.
few questions because she doesn't want to talk to other people.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
okay. Yes.
Questions
Absolutely.
invite conversation.
Right.
In this phase, she doesn't want to talk to people.
Right.
And I'll explain what I mean by in this phase in a second. But where you've got her in this part of her character arc, we want to set her apart as not speaking, right?
Right.
Another thing we want to make sure in her body language is that um, there's no smiling, there's no laughing. No laughing for joy. Sarcastic laughing is okay.
That sounds about like her.
It does. Yeah. Well, I mean, I read the chapter. I get where she's at. So it's not like, sarcastic laughing is okay because that affirms this worldview she's got going right now that everything's garbage. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
It's that hopeless worldview, so you get that sarcastic laughing. Pacing in this state, she's going to hold back in conversation, in
Okay.
apathy, and make side comments. You do this in her conversation between her daughter and Owen. Her daughter and Owen drive the conversation, and she's holding back and just kind of adding
Right.
herself in when she's exasperated or when she wants to like be snide about something.
Right.
Right. So this is the worst version of Kate.
That's
And
true.
yeah, and this is what we call her baseline voice. So voices modulate for two reasons. A voice will modulate to show character change because when a character changes, aspects of their personality change. So the voice will, not in real life, but in novels, that's a way that we can kind of shortcut character change. And then um Voices modulate for emotional state. So
Right.
as she gets sad or as she gets drunk or as she goes through different emotions, this voice is going to change. And by modulate, we take baby steps in the voice changing. So maybe when she gets really, really sad, we lose the like explaining things in educated and grounded language, but we're going to keep the shorter sentences ending with periods. We're going to keep the like holding back with apathy, and we're going to keep her body language. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't feel too sudden, like it's an
Yeah,
unmotivated change. Right.
exactly. And we always want her to feel like Kate.
Yes.
So we want her to have this solid piece of baseline voice that we can then go to. So you've got a character with some flashbacks. And what started this was me asking you about Kate's flashbacks. I want to see a different Kate here. So if we draw a hard line between your three changes in Kate, some of these things are going to stay, right? Well
Right.
educated and intelligent. She's always well educated and intelligent, right? That doesn't change,
Right. That isn't
right?
going to change. Right.
Stubborn. She's probably always stubborn.
I think
That's
that's
not going to change, right? That has nothing to do with her grief. It has nothing to
right.
do with loss. She's always
No,
stubborn.
it doesn't. You're right.
Yeah. Struggles to understand people. That's definitely who she was before. That may change here because she's opening up. What do you think? Is she going to continue to struggle to understand people?
I think she's going to get better at understanding people as she
Okay.
reconnects, or be more open to hearing their point of view, to asking questions, to
Yeah.
um, I,
Gotcha. So
I
open
think she's going
to
to be more open. Yeah,
others' perspective.
yeah,
And I love that because so right here already in your story, you have a moment where, and I'm going to mark these ones that are like different. I'm going to mark them in
right.
orange. Right here, you have a moment where she is experiencing change,
Yes,
and her voice will change, right? Like you've already started to talk about some of the ways her voice changes here, right? So instead of shorter ending sentences, we're going to have questions. We're going to have some probing, like light probing of people,
right,
and we're going to have maybe some we'll probably still have some short sentences when she speaks, but that adding in those questions and this when she gets into this state is going to create a difference for the reader. And the
right.
reader's going to be like, oh, she doesn't usually ask questions. And this is a new. Now, the reader won't like actualize that. The reader will feel that in the character voice change. The reader's not going to be able to be like, oh, I see that she asked a question here. And I've noticed that she's never asked questions before. But the reader, like, as readers, we are visualizing what happens on the page in our brains. Like our brain is creating this drama of what's happening because we are constantly reading people in the real world all the time. Right. Like when you're in a
Right.
group of people, you're reading how their
Yeah,
body language, how they talk, their
absolutely.
sentence constructions, how they're participating in the sentence. It's all just unconscious to you. You're reading it. And because you're reading that, we can, by the reason we're breaking the character voice out this way is we can take advantage of what's already wired into your readers' brains to say, hey, look, she's changing. Right. Like,
Cool.
so I can
That's
take advantage of like,
really good thing to know.
yeah. So I can take advantage of
Yeah,
like question asking and be like, hey, look, she's changing. And I don't have to tell the reader she asked a question for the first time. I can just have her do that. And the reader's brain, who's used to reading who's used to in real life interpreting all those signals, will go, huh, right? And then just
right.
unconsciously go, huh, there's something different there, right? Like the brain will trigger it. And you don't have to spell it out. And that's when we say the phrase show, don't tell, that's what we mean. We
Got it.
mean make that change, right? So this is one of the ways we're going deep into theory. Are you okay with this? Is this
I'm
helpful?
totally okay with this.
All
I'm
right.
learning.
All right. Um, like I said, your narrative structure is great. I don't have a lot to do with like to help you with your narrative structure, but I can tell you're like right now feeling the voices. You don't have them set. So I want
That's
to get you,
exactly what I am
yeah.
doing. You're right. What I'm trying to do, I guess what I've done up to this point is try and think, where is a person emotionally at this stage in the conversation?
And I don't want you to stop doing that. That's important, but I want to give you a base to work from.
No, it's good to have a
Yeah.
template to think about because there are
Mhm.
times when I am there, I'm wondering, how do I say this? How would she say it in her
Mhm.
own voice? You know,
Yeah, and it's
I
that
want
cheat
it to be
sheet.
distinctive, you know?
Yeah. So closed and private wants to appear competent. Has that always been true of her, or is that something that's been caused by grief?
I think it's more caused by grief, although she's probably, because of her background, her mother is the woman that's on the table in the scene,
Okay.
is quite a bit like her in the fact that she's stubborn. She
Okay.
thinks she's right a lot of the time. She's judgmental. Um, and, and, uh, and what worries that she's not perfect. I guess that's one thing that really drives Kate is that she likes to see herself as being perfect when she's not. You know,
Yeah.
that's part of being I'm always right.
Do you
Uh,
do you use the Enneagram?
do I use
The Enneagram? It's a personality thing.
no, no, I
Yeah.
haven't.
If you ever go look at it, she's a number one on the
Oh, is
Enneagram.
she?
Yeah. Um,
See, I think of her as a type A personality.
yeah, the type A personalities are usually the
Yeah.
number ones. Yeah. So she's also going to be, this isn't going to change either. Now
No.
I'm going to make a suggestion.
Hmm.
We've got her, the Kate before the story, we've got her price. She wants to keep her private life private. She's a black and white thinker who's judgmental, but she's gone through this trauma. So post story, I'm going to recommend that she struggles to share things.
Oh, that's very, very good idea.
You want her to start to really try to open up. And your dog is going to be a great vehicle for this, like a great way to do this, because you need to have the classic scene where she's alone with the dog. She starts to grieve again. Maybe she goes to take a drink, maybe she goes to do something that reinforces this negative behavior. And the dog can just be sitting and looking at her, but you need her to interpret that look as the dog telling her not to.
It's funny that you mentioned that because the next scene is very much that kind of a scene.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you need her opening up to the dog,
Yes.
talking to the dog. If she can talk to the dog, she can talk to real people. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And in the next scene, I've been working on the next scene. This is
Nice.
the scene where she decides to adopt him, and the person that is for the rescue
Yeah.
that you know who she adopted, she fostered through, calls and says, "We found a family.
Hmm.
We found somebody who really wants that dog." And up to this point, Kate's been saying, "I'm doing this begrudgingly. I'm doing it as a favor. I'm doing
Yeah.
it because I have to." But before that call, she's been with that dog. The dog and her have been communicating in a very profound way,
Hmm.
much more than they have up to that point, and she needs his comfort.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes out of. But when the person calls, she's sitting there asking the dog, "What do you think? Should I
Yeah.
adopt you?"
Um, and I want to come back. Let's put a pin in that because something you had talked about is how do you write a conversation with a character that doesn't speak?
Yes.
Um, I'll show you. Remind me in a second, and let's get back
Okay,
to that.
I will remind you.
So, but this is a good moment of change for her. This is again going to give the reader that victory feeling that she's growing in healthy ways. So,
Good.
if she can start to open up, she kept her private life private, grieving in an unhealthy way. We want her here, healing by trying to connect with others.
That's
Um,
one of the major themes of the book. I mean, if you're getting into themes, that's really how she changes is by
yeah.
doing just that.
And I would say probably Kate before the book we have this uh confident in her relationships in life.
Yes, and she did. She had more functional
Mhm.
relationships,
Yeah,
ones that were satisfying relationships, to the point that the people that she doesn't necessarily want to see, like friends, for instance, still like her
yeah,
and still want the best for her. Um, and I think that says that she was that way.
yeah. And this black and white thinking isn't going to change. That's part of who she
No.
is. Yeah. So, and as we create this baseline, so you can see how we've gone from like personality into voice into how it
Mhm.
actually looks on the page.
Right?
Let's talk about how the changes look. So, future Kate, this is staying the same.
That's going to be the same,
Yeah.
right?
If you decide to use a phrase like what I mean by that, you may want to change that phrase to something like, you know, well, what do you think?
Yep. So she's
Right?
asking the question rather than automatically
Rather than
force feeding
automatically
information.
assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it brings about that like there's an aspect of humility here in question
Hmm.
asking that she doesn't have anywhere else. Confident, this is all going to stay, except um, I would give her smiling here.
Okay.
I would let her smile with people. And that's going to be another one of those shifts
Right.
where when she smiles, the reader's going to feel it. Does that make sense? Like it'll feel like a celebration.
Right.
So
Exactly.
hold it until it really matters. But when
Ah,
she has a moment of connection, let her smile. And then whoever she's having that moment of connection with, let them say, I don't think I've seen you smile before.
yeah.
And that's
Oh, that's cool.
the
Yeah,
reader will be
that's a good
like,
idea. I know
oh my
exactly
gosh. Yeah.
who did that.
Yeah. So bring that in like that moment of connection with her. Um Here when you get her to a place where she's healed, we talked about that light probing questions in short sentences. And then the pacing, instead of holding back in apathy, she's gonna hold there. You don't want her just going all board into conversations and like dominating conversations.
No.
It's too big a change. So you want her she's holding back in nervousness. And part of the way you can make that connection is talking about how she feels in the moment as things are happening. So there's a difference of like I'm holding back because I don't give a crap to I'm holding back because I don't want to ruin what's happening right now.
Right.
Does that make sense?
I might say the wrong thing.
Yeah. Now, so how do you feel about this change of
I
the ending of
think
change?
that I like that.
Okay.
And I think that the only thing I'm going to say about the smiling part, up to this point, I have given her smiles at points. They are points where either A, she actually has made a connection,
Yeah,
like with new friends, that type of thing,
that's perfect.
or she suddenly, she sees things in the dog. The dog doesn't think about what it's doing, it just
Smiling with the
does.
dog is perfect too, because there's
Yeah.
going to be, we have these characters that in Dialogue Doctor World we call engine characters
Hmm.
because they empower change. Those engine characters work as a bridge between here and here.
And I have some of those.
Yeah.
The
So
dog
when
is certainly
she's
one of them, and there are other characters that
yeah, so
do
when she's
that
an
to some
engine,
degree.
you're going to see her move
That's good to know.
between
That's
here and here.
really helpful.
If there's a character that brings out the worst in her, that's called her anchor
Hmm.
characters, and those characters are going to take her deeper into this
And
person.
I think that in these scenes we've encountered really anchor characters. Some
Yeah,
of them
Beth
anchor
seems like an
characters.
anchor. She seems like she brings out the worst in Kate.
She does,
Yeah,
absolutely, and they hate each other. They
yeah.
detest each other as far as that goes.
Owen seems like actually I don't know. Owen could be an engine, but he feels like an anchor in the scene you sent me.
I think the way she perceives him is as an anchor.
Yeah.
Now, what's happened directly before this particular, the first scene that we're looking at is
Hmm.
he is used to having to take care of the mother. She's been living down by him because Kate
Yeah.
and Agnes do not get along.
Yeah.
They never have, as far as that goes. And she always sort of favored Owen.
Hmm.
Uh, but Owen is primarily a family man. He's a person who takes his responsibilities
Yep.
seriously. He sees Kate as someone who gets in the way
Yeah.
and who isn't a good mom, who doesn't do the things that he thinks
Yeah. He
she
looks
should
down
be
on her.
doing.
Yeah.
Uh,
He's an anchor. He's somebody she's gonna have to overcome
yes,
to be
absolutely.
the best version of herself.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Yep. Okay, so the piece in the story I want to make sure you hit in part one,
Hmm.
early in part one, is we need flashbacks to who she was before her husband died. And here's what I want that to look like. This is going to stay the same.
Okay.
Words, educated, grounded language is going to stay the same. Language and what I mean by that is going to stay the same. We need to see her happy,
Right,
confident, laughing, smiling,
right.
joking. We need to see her doing all of these things, right? And in her language, I want her telling jokes, maybe even a little snotty. Because here's the thing is we don't need to like this version of Kate. We actually don't want to like this version of Kate.
Right.
We want to like this version of Kate. This is the version of Kate
That's it.
in the
K3
end.
is the one that we want to like.
Yeah, Kate 3 is the one we want to love. So you want to make her arrogant in this version. And let's go ahead and put that out, stubborn.
And she is to a
And
large degree. I think that's true.
yeah, because what you're telling is the story of somebody who's broken and rebuilding themselves. And
Right,
so the rebuild needs to be more pleasant than the other, right?
right.
And so instead of struggles to understand people, we may want to make this doesn't care to understand people.
I think she definitely more confident she's right.
Yeah. So you want to bring that out in her body language that she's having a good time, but that she is also very cocky. And then here, we're really going to change her cadence. So longer, complicated sentences.
Oh, okay.
Um, and
Now,
then,
that's one thing I haven't done in the flashbacks. I have not used dialogue at all in the flashbacks.
yeah, I need to see her talking. I need to see her at a party with her
Interesting.
husband. I need to see her at a party with her husband having a great time, talking to a group of people. I need to see her being the judge, confident, long, like sentences, telling stories, and pacing. She's going to hold the room.
Okay.
She's the one. She doesn't have to talk all the time, but she needs to be the commanding presence in the conversation. And
Now,
the
I don't see her necessarily as that kind of a person. I see her
okay,
more like when they're in social situations, her husband is the one who really takes center stage.
okay,
He's much more comfortable socially than she is.
okay. So we just
However, in situations where she's with friends, one to one, small
mhm,
groups, she definitely would be that way. Uh,
okay. So I hear what you're saying. So let's change it to say she needs to be confident interplaying with her husband. He
that
can
that
be
would
the
definitely be true. Yes.
life of the party, but
Hmm.
she needs to hold her own in the times that she talks. It really does engage the room. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think that's exactly how she'd be. People would
Yeah.
listen to her.
People would listen to her. She doesn't have to talk very often, but when she says something, it's relevant, it applies, and people at least pretend to like listening to her. Does that make
Right.
sense? Like, yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
So
Right.
if you can give us like a couple of these moments of the Kate before the story,
It's
we
good.
will really love the Kate after the story.
Good.
Yeah.
I can do that. I know
Um,
places I could do that.
a flashback to a fight with her husband would be great too. A
I have
flashback.
that.
Yeah. So I need her telling her husband things like, when are you going to grow up?
Hmm.
And you know, him being like, you're not always right. You think you're always right, but you're not always right.
Yep.
Sometimes the rest of us have opinions too, and they matter. And then she needs to say something mean, like, You know, if I thought you had an opinion that mattered, I might pay attention to you. But
Ah,
we don't like, so we need to see moments between them that she regrets, and moments between her and her daughter that she regrets. Ideally, we're going to see them from this perspective, from the lost and grieving Kate.
right.
Um,
But still, see, I haven't
as
done any dialogue in any of those, and I'm gonna go back and look at them from
Yeah,
that.
you gotta have dialogue in
Good
them. We
idea.
need a full flashback. If you
That's a
picture it,
good point.
yeah, you said you've done some screenwriting. If you picture it as a memory, as a cinematic representation of your book, these are powerful moments where we see the actors come together in the
Right?
life before and the life after. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Before and after his
Yes,
death.
it does, as
Yeah,
far as that goes.
yeah.
Yes.
Um, because what you want to avoid in this kind of story is making the before the Kate story seem like she was fine before he died, and then that might be her opinion of the world, that the world was fine before he died and then it all fell apart when he died. But when we see in her memories the truth of the situation, we'll be like, oh, that it's not that he died that broke everything. It was broken that he died revealed the break. Does that make
Well,
sense?
see, I think what happens as far as in their relationship does just that. I haven't shown it as far as in dialogue, although I think I go back and rewrite her
Yeah,
flashback as far as what happened the night he died. He's been all the way through their relationship, he's been unfaithful off and on, but it's always been, just a dalliance more or less. Now, all of a
gotcha.
sudden, he's with someone he really loves,
Yeah,
and he wants to leave. That's
okay.
what happens is the night before he dies,
He
he's
wants to leave. Great.
packing.
Yeah, and I need that scene. I need the scene
Yeah,
of him
with him
packing.
with actual, yep.
Yep.
I think it needs to have more to it.
Yeah, I
I've
need to
got
see
it
it.
fleshed, I've got it in
Hmm.
her mind as far as her kind of respooling it back. But no, it's dialogue, and I guess that's one of my, this is something that I had questioned you about
Hmm.
in my last email.
Yeah.
My biggest concern as far as in showing flashbacks, or showing emotion, her internal thoughts as we're going through, is that I'm bogging down the pacing, or
Yeah. So,
and that's something I guess I need to know how to balance that.
okay. So there's three more things I want to cover with you. And but I'm going to show you an exercise before we do those three things. But I want to talk to you about showing reflection, like her internal thought.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk to you about, I'm going to show you like what it could look like to talk to a nonverbal character.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to talk to you about flashbacks and some
Good,
different ways you can do
good,
this.
good, good.
So
Yeah.
let's talk real quick about an exercise. So when you get to another character, and if you're like, I'm not feeling their voice, you don't need anything this complicated for your other characters. Kate is our what we call our vehicle character. We're on an emotional journey with her. So we
Right,
have to see her change. She needs a complex voice, right? For
right.
a character like Beth, um, I'm just gonna say I don't necessarily even need a lot of Beth's backstory to build her voice. I'm just gonna say, give me three words that describe Beth.
Vindictive,
Okay,
self-righteous, and very rigid.
nice. So now with those three words, and this is why I say you can do this on your own with any character. With
Oh,
those three words, vindictive, self-righteous, and rigid, I'm just going to take those five components, right?
right,
Words.
right.
And usually what I'll do is I'll say which one is clearest, which one comes to me first. So, the one that's stuck in my mind is language. A vindictive, self-righteous person is going to um, routinely bring up times when others were wrong or failed,
That makes full sense.
right? And then like another like vindictive self-righteous thing that a person like that might do is um makes snide comments about um the worst version of people. So
I think that's
reminding people they
exactly what
can't
she says.
change.
Yes.
Yeah. So you've got her language to build off, and you can see like, so if we're talking about her like body language, you probably want judgmental body language,
Hmm.
arms crossed over her chest, rolling eyes when
Right.
people talk, sighs and huffs, right? All her body language when you talk about like cadence, the sentence construction. You probably want a gossipy cadence for her when she's talking to friends. So, like, when comfortable, lots of commas because
Right.
she's storytelling.
Right.
Uh, when not like comfortable, when combative, you probably want her to have declaratory statements.
Right. That makes full sense.
Yeah. And then you want her to be, for her pacing, you want her to be aggressive in conversations because she's self-righteous. She thinks she's right. So
I kind of see her as a machine gun.
yeah, perfect. Aggressive as a machine gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's this will give you kind of a template. If you do this exercise with characters, notice I
Oh,
don't need to do
hey.
all five, but here's the goal. When I look at her voice and when I look at Kate's voice, I want them to feel very different.
Right.
Right? So I would recommend like go ahead and do this with Owen. Go ahead and do this with characters. You just need 3 words for him, 3 words for her daughter. Make sure the 3 words are different. If you have
Right.
the same 3 words, all the voices are going to sound the same, and you get a
Right.
cast that all sounds like each other. Right? Like so, we want to pull that cast apart. But it's a tool you can do on your own. You don't need me to do it. Just to like and trust your gut, trust your instinct. Like you had that word machine gun in conversations, write it down. Well,
Okay.
what it does is after you've written a scene, when you're rereading
You
it,
can go back and review it
go
and
back.
see if it
Yeah.
fits.
Because a lot of
Yeah.
times what you're writing, you know, part of we were talking about the hard things of a novel. Part of what's hard about a novel is in the dialogue, you have to also get out the story beats, right? Like we need the events of the plot coming out. So there's going to be times where you like in your conversation with Owen and Kate and the daughter, there are these moments in there where they have to reveal information in the conversation. It has to
Right.
happen, right? But you want to make
Otherwise,
sure
it doesn't move forward.
yeah,
Absolutely.
otherwise it doesn't go anywhere. But you want to make sure it's happening in voice. Owen needs to do it in a way that sounds like Owen. So the first time you write it, it's likely you're going to have some moments where because you're focused on getting out information, it's not in voice. And then
Right.
you're going to like Kate may have she may talk in a whole paragraph at one point. And then when you go back to edit it, you want to look at her voice and you want to go like, okay, she speaks in short sentences, ending with periods. And then you want to go look at what you did, and you're like, oh, I need to break this up a ton. I need somebody else talking to her.
Yeah. Can't
I
just
need to
get
stretch
information
this
dump.
out.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll help you with moments like that. Does that make sense?
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Okay. Let's talk about talking to a non-verbal character. And I'm just going to give you kind of as we sit here, I'm just going to use your document. I'll send this to you when we're done.
Okay.
Sorry, I have my Zoom things get in the way. I'm turning off track changes because I don't want to see my changes tracked as we talk. So how that might look, let's just take it. I'm just gonna write fast.
Not a
What I
problem.
want you to focus on is conversational spacing with nonverbal characters.
What do you mean by conversational spacing?
So when we write a conversation, let's get down to one of your bigger. Here we go. When we write a conversation, you'll see that when somebody talks, it gets its own line,
Yes.
right? The dog's body language isn't verbal communication, but it always needs its own line, like it is,
That's what
because
I would assume.
yeah,
Yeah.
it creates that back and forth between the
Right.
characters. So, Kate went to pick up the glass filled with last night's scotch. I don't know what she drinks, but um what's the dog's name?
Fairbanks.
Fairbanks moaned as he took up a spot next to her on the couch. Right, like you'd have to dress this up a little bit, but
Right.
like, don't look at me like that. um she said, staring down at his big brown eyes.
Concerned
Yeah,
face.
big
Right.
brown. Yeah, that's perfect. Give him like anthropomorphizes, staring down at his concerned eyes. Um, the dog nuzzled her with his snout. So you can see
Right.
snout. No, I don't know how to spell it. You'll have to figure it out. But you can see how I'm giving conversational
Yes.
spacing,
Right.
right?
I see
Like,
that.
yeah, seriously, I need this. Um, you know, the dog
Nudges her
stared.
again.
Yeah, you don't even need that. You can be like stared back at her.
Right. That's even better.
Right? Like, stop it. Just go. Right? Like, and so you can see how like using this conversational spacing with nonverbal characters
Right.
like the dog gives you the energy of that conversation.
Right.
Yeah, because energy comes, and this is going into how you do flashbacks. Energy in your writing comes from the exchanges between characters. So
Right.
dialogue is characters interacting. It's not
Right.
speaking, like dialogue is characters interacting. So this is, here we've got 1, 2, 3 exchanges, and you can feel the energy coming off of it, right?
Going
Like,
tighter.
because it's
Yes.
the characters coming back. It zooms us into the moment. We're living in the scene as if we're watching it like a movie in our head. When
Right.
we have prose, see, this is the problem. You don't have a lot of like reflective prose in here because you're a good writer. So when we have reflective prose, like, well, let's say I'll just make one real quick. When we have reflective prose, like, you know,
The second scene has a lot more reflective prose because she's
does
by
it?
herself. Yep. 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 She's thinking through things. She's
Yeah, gripping the steering wheel. Here we go. So if we get into paragraphs, right? Summary paragraphs like this. The first 2 days back home, Alice begged for information about the accident. How did her father, her son, her moon, her, oh, this is perfect. Okay. So this is a flashback. This is great,
right.
right? So right now you have the flashback in a summary of reflective prose.
And this is exactly how I've done the flashbacks.
Yeah. So I'm going to
Give you a
encourage you
sense of that.
to
Yes.
make these into scenes
Okay.
instead of, because you lose all of the energy in here. The traffic thins as Kate passes through the Baltimore Zoo. As a child, Alice adored going there to feed the giraffes. That's fine. Crossing Northern Parkway, taillights and warehouse windows twinkle in the distance. Transport her to a short time she and her daughter shared after Joe died. This is the transition sentence you need
Right.
to
To
take
go
me into
into
the scene.
dialogue.
Yeah, they were back home, right? The first few days back home, Alice begged for information about the accident, right? Kate could hear the Alice's voice in her head. I don't know why you
Why
want,
can't you tell me about
just
dad's death?
tell
Yes.
me. Um, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Right? I just drop it. Kate responded. You see, now I'm in the moment.
Yes.
And that's what you want to get me into the moment, because it's in seeing their dialogue, their interaction, that the real emotional core of this memory is going to happen.
Now, is it in that kind of situation? Because to make a full-fledged scene, I have another chapter. I mean, not another chapter, but another scene in a way. Is it okay to have just snippets of dialogue like this and then go back to move the plot forward as far as
You
what
know,
she's remembering?
my general rule is, and again, there are no rules. There's just like tools and expectations. My
Right?
general like tool is try to get 3 exchanges per scene at least,
Okay, that's
right?
good
I
to
would
know.
say a highly emotive scene like this, where
Mm-hmm.
she's arguing with her daughter, that's worth a chapter, right?
Okay.
Like that's worth sitting in because it's an emotional moment that tells us about Kate, that tells us about her daughter, that especially in a scene like this where we've seen Kate fight with her daughter
Mm-hmm.
and we don't fully know the backstory. And what you
Right?
don't want to do is tell me the backstory, which is what's happening here.
That's what I'm doing there. I know.
Yeah. So show me the backstory. Like get me into that scene, get me into that moment, get them talking to each other, get them like, and let me live that moment. And then I, as the reader, get to make my own emotional interpretation of the backstory. Does that make sense? And that's what I want. You want to be in partnership with the reader, where the reader is interpreting on their, you're giving the reader the scenes and then the reader's interpreting the emotional journey they're taking with those scenes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
reader will take more ownership, if you give the reader the scene and let them live in the moment, the reader's going to take more ownership of
They're
the
more
story.
invested in it. I
They're
can see
more
how they would be.
invested.
Yes, from
Yeah,
an
they're
emotional
deeper
point
in
of
there.
view.
Yeah. The rule that I usually use for this is when I have a group of summaries like this, if I and I can usually just skim it with my eye and see like, oh man, I got a bunch of paragraphs here. I'm
Yep.
summarizing something. I'll go and I'll ask 2 questions. Question number 1, how important is it to the emotional context of the story? If the answer is mildly important to important, make it a scene.
Okay.
Work into a scene. The next question is, if it's not, do I need it?
Yeah,
If you
that's a good
don't need
question.
it, cut it,
Yep.
right? Like, so, or you get 2 paragraphs to do it, right? Like, if it's not emotionally important to the reader's experience of the story, cut it or cut it down as far as you can
Yeah.
without having to do it.
I've done that on some of them. I've gone
Yeah.
back and made them shorter.
So, but
Um,
these, if you
yeah.
can't like the here and here's the trick to writing these, you have to have a really strong, with every flashback the reader needs to know where they are, so you need a really
Based on that, on what we were talking about as far as the K 1, 2, and 3 in the sense.
in that, but more in a sense of space and time, because you're
That's
taking them
right.
back, right?
Right.
You don't want them to be confused about what's present and what's past,
No.
so you need a really good transition in, right?
Right.
Transport her to the short time she and her daughter had after Joe died. Kay could hear Alice's voice in her head. Really strong, like, hey, reader, we're in the
We're
past.
switching. We're
We're in
going
the past.
back.
Yeah. And then when you're going to bring me out of it, so they have this conversation, this back and forth. Ideally, it ends with the daughter saying something really mean to Kate. And then Kate is like, sure. Right.
Yeah.
Like, you're not wrong. Right. Like, this would be the last line. You're not wrong, Kate said back to her as she slammed the door.
The door.
Right. Um,
I have here and now scenes between Kate and Alice that are similar to that.
yeah. And so then you want
Alice does a lot of door slamming.
a lot of door slamming. Yeah. It's great for her age. So here you want a really strong transition back in.
Right.
Sitting in her car, it felt, uh, Kate felt like she was still there in that room. She could hear the door slam and her heart dropped, right? Um, wiping away that's spelled wrong, the tears from her eyes. She said to no one in particular. Man, if I could spell, this would go faster. Particular. Damn it. Just damn it. Right. Something like that. So I've got a clear transition into the memory,
Hmm.
and then I've got a clear transition out of the memory. We're
Okay.
back into the present, right?
Yeah.
Let the reader know where if you're going to make a memory into a scene, make sure the reader knows where you are in space and time. Each one needs a clear transition in and a clear transition out. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And these are the kind of
Yes.
scenes I want to see with Kate and her husband. I don't want to see them at the start. So if I were to say, like, hey, what's the ideal rollout of your story? I need some scenes of Kate being miserable and drunk and grieving alone, Kate being isolated, Kate being mean to somebody. Then I need a flashback where Kate's like looking at her husband's photo and we have them at a party having a good time, because that flashback sets up the question of how did we get
How
here?
did she get from here to here?
How did she get
Yeah.
from here to here? And then as we see her, work with the dog and start to connect with people, then you can start giving me some flashbacks of how the relationship had gone wrong.
Right.
Give me them fighting, give me them like arguing with each other. And that's showing me that Kate before the story. I don't want Kate before the story first. I want to know this Kate, Kate
Right.
lost and grieving, but use these scenes to explain this Kate to me.
Got it. That
Whenever
makes full
Kate,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, whenever Kate does something terrible, whenever Kate goes to start drinking again, flashback to explain to me what happened right in that moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we talked about voices, we talked about reflective moments. Let's talk inner thoughts. So, and this will be the last thing. I know I'm going a little over with you. Um, are you okay
I
if I hold you for another
appreciate
10
it.
minutes? Okay, good. As long as you don't have somewhere to be.
No, I don't have somewhere to be. I'm very willing to stay.
Okay, so you're writing in what's called third person close,
Right.
which means you're close to Kate's thing. I think you're doing a good job with her inner thoughts. The only thing I wanted you to add in here was how she feels about the people she's talking with.
Okay.
You have a lot of how she feels, and you have a lot of like her body language that shows her feeling, but you don't tell me how she's responding to other people. So Kate weighs her brother argument against her daughter's distress. Alice, honey, you need to calm down. Mimi's just come out of surgery. She's fragile right now. She needs rest. To give me a deeper perspective, Kate weighs her brother's argument against her daughter's distress. God, why couldn't they both just pull their stuff together? Alice, honey, you need to calm down. Do you see how that line
I see
gives?
exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alice hugs herself as tears glisten in her eyes. She wants me here. The rest of you want me here, but she loves me. The words stabbed Kate like a knife.
Yeah.
You're talking to me about how she feels about what Alice just said. I love you.
I can see very much how that would help intensify that.
It's gonna crank all of your emotions up to 11
Yeah.
10. You only love me when I do what you tell me. Kate changes her approach. Tell me why, right? This
Right.
You only love me when you do what you tell me. Kate couldn't take another verbal beating like that. How she her you know
Right.
her
Right.
mouth went dry. She wanted to drink again, right? She you
Right.
know looking back at her daughter, she realized this was just going to continue in this pattern. She changed just her approach. Give me her thought pattern, like where's she going in this change of approach. And then say, I understand you want to be here, but you're breaking the rules. Why don't we go downstairs and get some dinner? So knowing her voice now, right? This is a place where I'd probably edit a little bit. I understand because this is a complex sentence for her. These are
Right. We
two
could
long
stop it right
sentences.
and get some dinner, period. or talk this over
I
when,
would break it into two, right? Like Kate changes the prose. I understand you don't want to be here, but you're breaking the rules. What do you care about rules? Um, Alice snapped. Kate sighed. How much more of this would she have to bear? Or I'd probably say, like, Kate sighed, uncertain if she'd earned this abuse.
yeah, which would be closer to how she is. That's
Yeah.
true.
Why don't we go downstairs to get some dinner and talk this over? So you can see how I've put this. I haven't changed the content. I've
Right.
just put it in her voice by creating an extra exchange.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
But in third person, this is kind of the joy of third person close. The joy of first person POV is that you really get to hear their thoughts going. The joy of third person close is perspective. We get perspective from Kate.
Right.
So we really want to feel that perspective. So when she talks, make sure I know how she feels about things. Does that make sense?
Can it ever be too much? Like it feels like it's too on the nose?
Oh, it
Do you do
absolutely
that?
can. It absolutely can feel too much. So the way your gauge of it is, um, vocalizations, exchanges and vocalizations like this. I love you.
Mhm.
You only tell me that when you want
I could
to.
really feel the difference, emotional impact when you said it hit her like
Yeah. So adding
I
the
could feel that.
adding the perspective increases emotional impact, but slows the reader's experience.
Exactly.
So if you want rapid fire dialogue, like they'd have in like a TV show like Gilmore Girls, where two characters are just popping back and forth,
Mhm.
only vocalization.
Right.
And that'll give you that rapid style feel. But if you're in a scene like this one that's highly emotive, you want more perspective from Kate
Got it.
so we can feel the
Yeah, that makes
emotions.
full sense
Does
to
that
me.
make sense? And
Yes.
that the way you combine the two is that rapid fire dialogue back and forth until it's coming to a close, and then punch us with a big emotional moment by giving us a lot of perspective.
Got it.
Right. So you can see,
I'll
like,
have to do that.
yeah, going back up to the conversation we were writing about Kate and Alice. I don't know where it is, but I'll just, like, shoot it off. Like, um, why won't you tell me what happened to dad? Just drop it. I just want to know. You don't want to know, leave it alone. Right.
Yeah.
You never share anything with me. You treat me like a child. I'm not a child anymore. Why won't you just talk to me? Right. Um, you are a child and you're behaving like a child right now. Stop talking to me like that. Stop talking to me that way. I hate you. Um, with that, sorry, somebody said something in the background through me. I hate you. Yeah. So stop talking to me like that. Stop talking to me that way. I hate you. The words rang in Kate's head. They
Yeah.
cycled over and over. It wasn't that she didn't know how to comprehend them. It was that they felt deserved and earned. Right.
Right.
She should hate me. I
Yeah.
deserve to be hated. Right. And then you give me Kate's vocalization. So you can see I have the, like, rapid fire back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Deliver the gut punch. Alice says, I hate you. And then stop the rapid fire and give me perspective
Give her
and make me
perspective as far as how
sit
she feels about it.
in the heat of that emotion.
Right.
Right. And
And that
that's,
gives a chance to see her recognizing
yeah,
like her error in the
her
conversation.
recognizing her error. But what you're doing there with the different style of writing, of the, like, fast exchanges back and forth, is, remember I said exchanges build energy. So you're building that energy. You're building, 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 building until you're ready for a payoff. And then
Right.
when you want to pay off, use all that energy you've built and pay off, slow us down and give us all the perspective. So all of that energy comes crashing down on the reader. Right. It doesn't just work for sad
Right.
moments, it works for joyful moments too. Right.
Right.
Like, but when you want us to feel it, slow it down and give us perspective. When you want to create energy and you want it to feel like this back and forth debate or argument or like super joyful, exciting
Mhm.
time, stick with the vocalizations just back and forth between the characters.
That's really helpful.
Awesome. Okay. Anything you want to talk about before I send you out to write?
I don't think so. I think you've given me a lot to work with.
Okay. Great.
Now what I
Um,
got to do is go back and look at what I've already written. I'm at a good place to do that
okay.
because where I'm at the end of a part, I can go back and look at what I've written up to this point and
Okay.
at
And
least work on
my
it.
advice is do what motivates you. If writing new stuff motivates you, go ahead and finish the book.
Well,
And then
that's
you'll
one
have
of
to
the
go
things
back
I'm
and edit.
concerned about is getting through the book.
Yeah.
I do have actually one question for you,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that is, how do you know when you've got too much going on and are going to have too long of a book? Because that's one of the things that's been like why you don't see a lot
That's a tough
more.
question.
Yeah, it's a hard.
Yeah. You're writing lit fic,
Yeah,
literary fiction. There's not really a length limit.
okay. And
The
then
reader
if
cares
I
more
go
about,
over 100,000 words, the publisher isn't going to say, "Oh my God,
it
you're."
depends. It depends what publisher you're talking to. For literary fiction, um, it's more about the emotional journey than it is about the word length. If you're writing like in a more genre-based fiction, like if you're like, yeah, it's a detective novel and it's 130,000 words, I'd be like, no, 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 your detective novel is 80,000 words. Like you have to cut half of that. So like, but for literary fiction, it's about taking us on a journey. We need to be in all these scenes.
Well, that's really helpful to know from the standpoint. I have found very little in the way of literary fiction as far as guidelines, suggestions.
Yeah, because there's not.
Yeah,
It's more about taking us on an emotional journey and exploring the important themes.
which is what
So,
I love about it.
yeah.
That's the part that makes it interesting to write.
Yeah, I've been in that direction too. And the I think the key to writing really great literary fiction is pulling into the moments and really
Hmm.
capitalizing on the emotion. So, like an author right now who I would say is kind of literary fiction light, that does this with memories really well. If you haven't read Friedrich Bachman's A Man Called Ove,
I haven't.
I would read that. He
I
does
will.
these because it's very much this style of character in that. Oh, I turned off my screen share. It's very much the style of character you're talking about with Kate. So I was pulling up the thing and I'm like, Nancy can't see that. It's very much the style of character you're talking about with Kate, and that we're meeting Ove in the middle of life. His wife has
Ah,
died. He's having suicidal ideations. He's isolated and alone. And we watch Ove in the present grow into somebody who's connected to his neighbors and finds healing through this forced connection with
I'll definitely read it. It's a man called Oaf. What is his name again, as far as the author?
Friedrich Bachman.
Friedrich Bachman.
Yeah, I
Okay.
haven't watched the movie. They made a movie of it. I haven't watched that, but
I've
the book
heard of
is
it.
fantastic.
Yeah, and I've heard of the
Yeah.
book too. I just never read it.
But Bachman's great at taking us. There is an old Ove, like there's a version of Ove before his wife dies. We see scenes where they meet. We see them fall in love. We see him like have to earn her father's respect, right? Like we see all these things. And Bachman brings them in, just like I was talking to you about. Like he pulls them in moments where um you need something explained. Why does Ove miss his wife so much? Let's see their meet. Let's
Oh,
see
that's
their meet cute.
interesting.
Why is Ove good at cars? Let's show him
Let's see.
trying to earn her father's respect
Yeah.
with cars. Why is this particular car in the garage so important to Ove? Let's go back to the moment he was with his wife in it, right? Like, so it's those like the flashbacks, and Bachman writes the flashbacks as full scenes, just like I was telling you. It's like
Right.
transition in, here's the scene, transition out, right? Like it's that letting us in. Another one that did it really well is The Dutch House. This is another lit fic over the last like 5 years. The House by Ann Patchett, I think it is. They do a lot of memory, like
I've read The
flashing.
Dutch House.
Okay, so you've read it. So they're
Yeah.
like sitting in the car, smoking cigarettes, talking, and then all of a sudden, their children back in the house, right?
And
Like,
Tom
and
Lake is quite a bit like that too.
yeah, that's another one.
Yeah.
And so being able to transition, being able to remove those summaries and actually live in those moments is going to help you connect to editors. I would say, like, I'm not a lit fic publisher or agent, but from what I see from what they publish and take on, they want to live in those moments, right? Like they want to feel all of
That's
this.
really helpful to know.
Yeah.
It's good. It's, the most, I haven't had any advice from anyone else on it. I've read though, a lot of advice.
Yeah.
And that's really different advice from what I've thought I've been hearing. Most
Okay.
of the
Well,
time they just number crunch and say nothing over 110,000 words.
yeah. And that's, I find that kind of advice fine. Like it's important, but it's not always helpful because especially with literary fiction, you're telling a story, right? Like
Yeah.
you've got an emotional journey you're taking me on. And if I'm into it, I will let that emotional journey go for 200,000 words, right? Like if I'm deep into it, because it's more important about connecting the emotional scenes. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that's really an important part of it is if the audience, if the reader isn't emotionally
Engaged. Yeah.
engaged, then you've lost it.
Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah.
we can think about like books that these like lit fic books that have done that we think of as like the Grapes of Wrath or like Michener's books that are like Hawaii and like those books are giant. Like yeah,
Yeah,
like it's
I
not,
know
yeah.
they are. I don't
Yeah.
know if
But they
I.
keep you so
Well,
engaged in
they
the
do,
characters.
to the
Yeah.
point that when it's done, you feel bad that it's over.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
that's what you're
Yeah.
looking for in lit fic.
Good.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording and we can talk a little bit more.
Okay. Mhm.